What you don't know can hurt you, and what you do know can set you free. That's why we interview subject matter experts for your small to medium sized business and personal finances, because knowledge is power, but experience is everything. Welcome to The Tipping Point. The Tipping Point is brought to you in part by Tirani and Velez LLP, your tax and accounting subject matter experts. Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm your host, Gabriel Velez. Our guest today is Tony Kamel, President and CEO of Core Insight Systems, Inc. Core Insight Systems provides a unique business intelligence solution that directly connects to the cloud. Their solution makes monitoring performance and quality in a manufacturing and assembly setting a breeze. Furthermore, their solution doesn't require the massive capital investment or challenging installation that other solutions do. Hey, welcome to the show, Tony.
Hi, thank you.
How's it going today? How are you doing?
It's going well. We got a perfect weather here in SoCal, so can't complain.
All right, nice. So I want to get into the system, but before I get into the system, I want to kind of walk through your entrepreneurial journey and talk a little bit about your background. So, tell us about your prior work experience before starting this company.
Boy, that can go back as far as you'd want to go. Basically, I got my start as a mechanical engineer in the paper industry, which is actually really good because in the paper industry, being a commodity, any moment of downtime is a really big deal.
Yeah.
So I learned early on that any type of outages are significant, and you need to work really hard to re-engineer or engineer things such that, reliability is key. And to do that, one of the things I found out right in the beginning is that whatever you want to do, you have to justify.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always interesting whenever you go to ask for money, what's the first thing anybody asks you? Whether it's your parents, whether it's your friends, whether it's your boss, they ask you what? Why? Right? Why do I want to give you money?
Yeah.
And you have to go through that justification. So as I mentioned, I started in the paper industry. From there, I was in the personal care industry. We did lotions and hair care products. And then walked into heavy industry, got into the cement side of life. From cement, got into foods, and then from foods into wood processing. So I've got pretty wide breadth of a background. And what was common through all of those is exactly how do I get the information that I need to do my job?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is every company has that data, right? There's no question about it, whether it's the people on the production floor, whether it's people in the office, whether it's some software that you have in your organization, the data is there. But in how many different places and in what format? And then am I able to put that data together in some intelligent way to prove my argument that I want to make a change to the process or change to the machinery? And that's always been kind of the biggest challenge. So where Core Insight really got its start is when I was in the foods industry, we were making beverages. There was something that they called a planning efficiency. In other words, the planners at the beginning of the day would say, hey, you're making, 100 bottles a minute, and in 8 hours, you should make 48,000 things. I'm done. Okay, I want it to be that simple. And what they found, though, is that every single day their efficiencies were like 50, 60%, and they were never where they needed to be, and they couldn't understand why. And I was given the project to figure out what's the gap between what the planners are saying and what is shipping out the door.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that became glaringly obvious is that unless you're on the production floor, you don't necessarily understand all the little nuances of something that's going on. And I think a simple way to say it is like if you're making white paint and you're going to go and make black paint, it only takes a couple of seconds to make that transition. But what if you're going from black paint to making white paint? Think of how much you have to clean that system.
Right.
So depending on how you set your production schedule, you could be down for a couple of minutes to go from white to black, but you might be down for a few hours or more to go from black to white. Well, if you're a planner, you may not necessarily look at it that way. You may just say, oh, okay, I'm going down from black to white. I'm going to schedule that to be 1 hour. Not realizing that, well, in that hour, does somebody have to go and do an inspection? So is that person available to do the inspection? So if you have one person that's going to inspect the line, make sure it's clear and ready to go, what if there's 3 other lines at the same time that are asking for that same person's time?
Yeah.
Well, now you've got all this extensive downtime. So what I was able to do is I put together a crazy spreadsheet that was able to make that connection through all the different activities that happened on a production floor. And so instead of scheduling it for 480 minutes at 100% efficiency, what if you'd schedule it for 320 minutes at a realistic running efficiency of, say, 85%? Well, once you did that, we started seeing some pretty massive benefits. And the benefits were communication, because now the people on the production floor felt like management was actually talking to them. And not only that, but it gave them now a voice to where now they can say, hey, I need help. So if I only have one inspector, what do you want me to do? And then you can start making the justification that, do I need more inspectors online, or do we need to change the way the production scheduling process is done? So it turned out to be a pretty elaborate spreadsheet. And from there, we actually said, let's turn that into software. And then as I started turning that into software, the company wanted to kind of go a different route with it. And that's when I'm like, you know what, this is something that should really turn into a small business. And that really is what started Core Insight.
Yeah. Do you think that that employer just didn't want to make the investment that it would take to turn it into software, or that they were kind of married to the old ways that they used to do things?
Yeah, they were definitely not interested in the extreme cost of turning it into software. That's for darn sure. But what they were really more interested in is trying to figure out where to close those gaps. And then with the spreadsheet and the tools I was able to put together, they were able to get exactly that. So they saw some pretty healthy gains from that. And then what I also learned real quickly thereafter is having software is one thing.
Yeah.
But it's like me handing you an app for your phone. It's not the same unless you actually have the phone, right? So I got to have a way to do it. So that's what forced us to say, you know what, let's build some technology as well. So I can now help you acquire data from your machines, from your processes, from your people. And now putting that all together with that data and the software, now you've got a full solution that puts us in the world of what we call business intelligence software.
Okay. So part of you being in, like a commodity type industry where cutting costs is like the absolute only way that you can really grow a profit, obtain more market share, right? And become, have that competitive advantage. That kind of puts you in the mindset of tracking efficiency and quality systems, plus your background, right? So you've always worked in operations and you're an engineer. And so it started developing that idea in your head, and then you decided to turn it into a software and an actual system.
Right. We want a solution that can basically work throughout the production floor, right? So whether it's looking at the processes, whether it's looking at machinery, because like one of the things I love to talk about is infrastructure. So an air compressor or a big air conditioning unit, nobody really worries about those things on a day-to-day basis unless something happens, right? If I lose my air conditioner and my office area is now 85 degrees, it's probably a pretty big deal. But meanwhile, what about, let's say 2 weeks ago, if I could have noticed a vibration that was turning out to be something bad that in 2 weeks would shut me down? So how difficult is it today to put vibration technology out there so that it can keep you connected? It's not a very easy thing today. It may not necessarily be the most expensive thing, but it's time consuming. And most places don't have a bunch of resources standing around waiting for you to give them an assignment.
Yeah.
So the goal is to be able to help you monitor kind of anything within your organization. So that, like I always say, let the patient say it needs help so that you don't have to worry about it.
Right. So Core Insight Systems, what exactly does it do? Like if we broke it down, hardware, software, what do these things do?
So what we do is Core Insight tries to give you what we call the plug and play solution. So we'll come in the beginning, and from a consulting standpoint, we'll take a look at what is it that you actually want to monitor. And let's just say it's a production line. So if you want to look at a production line, we can say, okay, what is it you want to look at? Say, well, I want to look at my throughput. I want to look at how many pieces per minute am I actually making throughout the day. So we want to count. But you could say, like, if you look at a water bottle, you could say, well, water bottle, I'm just going to count water bottles going by. But on a water bottle, you have a few things you need to worry about. Is there a cap on it? Is there a label on it? Does it have the right amount of liquid in it? So you could ask yourself 4, 5, 6, or a dozen questions. So we'll work with you to figure out how many different questions do you need to have answered so that at the end of the day, you know that you actually have a good bottle that's going down the line. So let's say that takes 5 sensors to do that. We'll actually help you specify which sensors that you need. We'll figure out how and where they need to be mounted. And more importantly, how do they need to work together?
Yeah.
So you could have all 5 that each one of those have to say yes before I give you credit. And so that's what our software does. Is not only does we come in with the sensors, but then our software allows you to configure that sensor array such that all 5 have to be yes to give you a count. So now I can actually give you raw data that says I made this many this hour, this many this hour throughout the day. And you'll get a full graph of what's been made throughout the day. Now you take that one step further with our other bit of hardware, and that is we can now apply what we call our intelligence to it. You can say, what product was I making at the time? So you scan a barcode. Now I know I was making a 12-ounce bottle of water or 16-ounce bottle of water. You can know who was on the line. You can know how many how many downtime events that you've had. You can have reason codes associated with those. So we start adding all of that information. So step one is get that throughput data, know how many pieces per minute you're actually making at every moment. And then the next one is to add intelligence to that. So really that's what we're all about, is to help you identify the sensors, where do they need to go, and then give you the technology to get that sensor information to the cloud, along with a way to interface with your operations team, and again, get that information to the cloud. And then also then let the cloud feed back to the operator. So one of the things that we talk about is industrial psychology, and that is, how do you keep your team motivated?
Yeah.
Right. So I could put up a big screen there that just turns red or green if you're doing great, if you're doing bad. But if the tool isn't really being managed properly, and let's say that it always stays red, how long before you completely just ignore that? Right. If it stayed red for the last 4 days in a row, you're probably never even going to look at it again. You don't worry about it. But if it's dynamic and it's accurate and you're giving realistic feedback, we're able to see efficiency gains of 20 to 25% without even breaking a sweat, just by giving realistic feedback to the operator.
Yeah. I mean, I think from the psychological standpoint, if an employee understands what the problem is and is given the solution or how to, fix the problem, and they feel accomplished in fixing the problem, it will increase productivity, right? And an employee. So it's not just about the data. It's also about what you're going to do with the data and how to translate the data into better production. So on the consulting side, just to break this down a little bit, first you come in, you consult with the business owner. Usually this is a manufacturing business or an assembly type business, right? And you determine what it is that winning is for them. Is it a certain amount of quality assurance, a certain amount of productivity? You sit down with them, figure that out, right? And then you determine what the appropriate way to measure that is. So it might break down into, like you said, a couple sensors, one to 5 sensors, and then you use your proprietary hardware. The sensors aren't necessarily your hardware, correct?
Yeah, we call ourselves sensor agnostic. So
okay.
You can use any of today's industrial sensors. So that's one of the things that we feel very proud of, is that we can take any digital sensor or any analog sensor. And so if you're going to just count things, or if you want to monitor the amount of flow, or the amount of electricity being consumed, whatever the case may be. So we use any off-the-shelf sensor, because a lot of companies actually are going to require a certain brand. Right. So some companies will say, hey, you can only use X company, and that's it. And so if you were to come in with your own proprietary sensors, they're going to go, yeah, we don't want to talk to you.
So that really reduces the time that it would take to implement a system, right? And it probably brings down the cost greatly, because maybe some of your competitors would have to design like a proprietary sensor, right? Versus you're able to take something off the shelf.
Correct.
Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why your system's such a kind of novel concept there. And then it hooks into your node, which is a proprietary.
So our nodes, those are the two devices that we bring to the market, right? So one we call our SI node, and quite creative, but it's a sensor interface node.
Okay.
But it's the one that actually you plug it into a wall, standard 110 outlet, but it's providing power to the sensor. So again, whether it's an analog sensor or a digital sensor, it's supplying the power to the sensor so that it'll do its job. And then it's taking those signals and bringing them in. And then the node is actually what we call our IoT device, Internet of Things device. And that's actually taking that sensor signal and feeding it up to our cloud platform.
Okay.
So that's the SI node. And the other one is the UI node, again, very creative, the user interface node.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's the one we'll actually interface with the operator. So it's got an HDMI port on it, so you can have a monitor. So now you can give the employee that a feedback. It's got a USB port, so you can use a barcode scanner so that I can get information in to the system. So between those two, we collect the data, and then we can add some intelligence to the data.
Got it. Okay, and then you have your software that sits in the cloud and is able to interface with like a client's current ERP or enterprise resource planning solution or accounting solution.
Exactly. So our software's got a very user-friendly API that we've built into it.
Yeah.
And that API is what allows you to interact with pretty much any companies. So you mentioned ERP, you got MRPs, you got CRMs. I mean, all the different types of software out there, we can easily interface with them. So we can either take information from that software or we can give information to that software.
Okay, and then that would relay information to management in a way that they're used to seeing it because of the API. And API is what different software uses to kind of transmit information back and forth and communicate, right?
Yeah, it's almost like an escrow account, right? So it's like it's taking information from let's say from Core Insight, and it's holding it until somebody from the other side and the ERP side, let's say, came and grabbed that information. So it's a way to create that kind of buffer.
Got it. Okay. What types of businesses are you currently working with?
So right now we're working with lumber industry. We're in the cabinet industry. We're in the aerospace industry. And I'm not sure. Let's just call it custom industry. So they're making very specialized custom components.
Okay.
But pretty high volume. And we're doing everything from counting to operator interfaces to quality. We're just doing a lot more now with maintenance and condition-based monitoring.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to be able to understand what's the vibration on a machine. We want to know if it's running too hot, if it's too cold, whether you've got liquid vessels, let's say. So we've got a few installations where we're monitoring tank level so that they can at any time open up your cell phone, open up your laptop, take a look. You can see how much product I have anywhere in my organization. Typically, what I find very interesting is that when I start a conversation with a company, they always want data. Everybody wants data. They want terabytes of data. But at the end, it's kind of hysterical because at the end of the day, do you really want the data or do you want what the data tells you?
Right.
So as I mentioned earlier about about being the patient, what if like on these tank systems, so we put in this level tank system and you can look at the changing levels of your vessels and all the other things. Is that really what you're interested in? Or are you more interested in the fact that, hey, it got below 20%, it's time to reorder. And it could automatically send me an email or a text message saying, hey, tag number 3, it's time to reorder.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, that's what it really comes down to. And that's what I really focus on is what we call our notification system and our scorecard system. So our notification system allows you to set your expectations, and anything you monitor, it will automatically tell you what's going on. And on top of that, with our scorecard system is that maybe every hour, every shift, every day, every week, whatever you want, it'll automatically give you a summarized scorecard on what's going on in your operation. So like our one facility we've got out here, we've got 16 of our assets up and running. So they get a scorecard every 8 hours. So when they finish their shift, a new shift comes on, their entire team gets a summary and they know exactly where they're at. And their sales forecasting is done daily. So they need to know up to the moment where they're at with orders. So are they going to be able to make the order today or do they got to ship short because it's got to go out the door? Yeah. And we've been able to do pretty amazing things for them. We've saved them at least over 120 man hours a week of labor just by giving them that information on top of the efficiency improvement.
That's massive. Yeah. So yeah, not only from a production standpoint, but also from a maintenance standpoint, right? Like you were talking about, checking the vibration on a machine, maybe checking the heat on a machine if it's running hot. Mm-hmm. You can kind of preempt it breaking down, which the downtime is like a massive loss, right? Also, like actually maintaining the machine and being able to get as many hours out of it or as long of a life, right? Versus having to go back and make a massive capital investment again. And so some of these pieces of machinery are really expensive. Like, in my experience, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Mm-hmm. Yeah, easily. And, comparatively, a system like yours that comes in and monitors that stuff and preempts those types of problems, very, very inexpensive in comparison. Yeah, massive. So,
something you might want to think about that makes it real simple on the condition-based monitoring. If you're a company, let's say you have to cut something. So I have a blade.
Yeah.
When I put in a brand new blade, you get a nice clean edge, quality's happy. But after you've cut 20 miles worth of product,
yeah,
how clean is that edge? Well, obviously the degradation is going to happen over time. But at what point do you decide to stop and change the blade?
Yeah.
Typically, that's going to happen when somebody does a quality inspection and it goes, okay, these parts are not great anymore. So they're probably not bad enough to be rejects, but they're not as great as they were. Well, our software allows you to do tool tracking. So when you put in a new tool, you scan a barcode. I know the tool went in. And then because we're doing the throughput monitoring, the piece per minute monitoring, we can actually correlate that back. So let's say you know that I can run 20 miles of product before there's an issue. Well, the moment I get to 20 miles, my system can send me a notification that says, hey, time to go check on the tool. Or even if you don't want to do that, you can just say, hey, it's time to replace the tool. Now you have time to schedule the downtime to make the change without having unexpected downtime and maintain quality and keep everybody happy that way.
Yeah, efficiency is the name of the game, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, especially when you're dealing in volume like that. So, in your experience, what? So, can you cite some other examples of how customers and have saved money using your system?
Really, a lot of it just comes down to how do I maximize the amount of time out on the production floor? So one of our customers back east, one of the things that they wanted is basic throughput. They wanted to be able to give that industrial psychology feedback bit to their operator. And we were up and running for about, I would say, 6 months. And one of the things that we found that was pretty remarkable is that they weren't necessarily losing a lot of time because they weren't running fast enough. What they were losing was the amount of time in the beginning of a run. So when you change over from my example from earlier, if I'm going to run white paint and I'm going to black paint,
right?
How long does it take before I get to my full speed, right? So like when you take off from a stop sign, you're not just going from 0 to 100 instantly. You got to get up to 100, right? So it's the same type of thing. But what's called a startup curve, how long does it take to get me at my full production rate? What they ended up finding through our data and through data mining, we found that they were taking over 90 minutes to get up to speed in something that they thought was like flipping a switch, right? So again, taking off from a stop sign, I'm going 0 to 60, I'm there. It didn't work that way. They were taking a long time to get there. So after some consulting work with them, we ended up finding out that there were just like little adjustments that used to have like let's say a wing nut on it, but it had a different type of nut on it, and the operator had to have a tool, and the tool wasn't a very good tool.
Yeah.
So it really didn't allow them to set it just correctly. And just little subtle things that seem obvious once you see it, but when you have no clue what you're looking for, it was amazing. So what we found is that spend a little bit of time, make their adjustments easier for them to do. And we took that 90-minute startup curve and it's down to like 6 minutes or something now. So that alone gave them well over 12 percentage points of improvement across 6 assets within 2 months.
Yeah.
And it was huge.
Yeah, I find that business owners, executives at smaller companies, they're just spread so thin doing multiple things that they might think in the back of their head, like that 90-minute example that you have there. He might think, oh, that takes 10, 15 minutes. Like I'm not even going to worry about it. But it's not until somebody comes in and actually points that out, and hopefully it gets handled before it hits the P&L and the balance sheet, the income statement and the balance sheet. Because once you see it on your financial statement, and I'm an accountant by trade, once you see it on a financial statement, it's too late. Yeah, it's way too late. And, those are what you call lagging indicators, right? And what you're dealing with are leading indicators, like preempt the problem before it hits the pocketbook.
But you touch based on exactly what I say Core Insight's all about, and that is we're basically trying to give you additional resources without actually having to hire them, right? So if I can help the machinery raise its hand and say, hey, I've got a problem here. So whether it's the engineers, whether it's management, whether it's maintenance, whoever's going to troubleshoot the problem, it's easier for them to figure out where they need to start looking.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. But in today's world, whether it's a small company, whether it's a large company, everybody's trying to do it with less resources. And how do I make those resources kind of more powerful, more and able to use their time much more effectively throughout the day? And that's where we come in, right? So whether it's maintenance, whether it's quality, whether it's operations, the more sensors that we can put in and make your factory what they call a smart factory, but not only make it a smart factory, but do it for an investment that's not in the millions of dollars, right? Not everybody's GE or GM that can go and spend $20 billion to outfit a factory because they understand the value of it. But if you're just a small $3 or $4 million a year company, and I come in and say, oh yeah, I can do that for $1 million. You just might as well just go home.
Yeah. I see the evolution of like IoT, Internet of Things, taking over here very shortly. So like everything's going to be smart, like you're saying, right? So you have smart machinery. You're gonna have a smart fridge. You got Alexa and Google Home and all these things, right? Communicating, and it's really, really imperative for a small business owner to kind of stay ahead of that curve. Otherwise, a lot of these manufacturing companies might get priced out just because they won't be able to compete with some of the larger companies that are trying to make that are making these investments already. And so your product's way more accessible than what some of the really really large companies are doing. Yeah,
And you're absolutely right. The thing is today, if I go buy a brand new Lexus, it comes with all that fancy stuff.
right.
But if I'm running a 1987 Chrysler or something, you don't necessarily have it. Well, in manufacturing is not like at your home, right? At your home, you go buy a new refrigerator, boom, there it is. But in manufacturing, if I'm running a $10 million punch press, I'm not going to replace it, right? I'm still running that same press I was running back in the 70s.
Right.
Versus maybe the guy down the street somehow got funding and he was able to buy a brand new press. So it has all that fancy technology in it. So we're decades away from replacing these old assets with smart technology, because smart's here, right? It's definitely here. There's no question about it. But what if you have, like the aerospace company that we're in, they've got 14 assets that range from 2017 to like 1962.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things is if I buy a brand new machine today, and let's say I buy a brand new machine tomorrow, how do I bring those two machines together in one database? So that's a problem when I have two different potential suppliers, or even just two different generations of product. I want to go to the same database. So there's that challenge as well. But now, if I'm running that 1962 machine, where do I get the data from?
Right. Yeah.
And so that's really what drove us. So we actually have a couple of different generations of our technology, our hardware under our belt, because what we needed to be able to do is figure out, how do I come in without it being capital, keep it expense, but keep it super simple, so that the first day that I come in, I can hook up to a 1962 machine and within 15 minutes start giving you that throughput information or that condition-based monitoring information that you may need. But more importantly, I can couple all 14 together very, very quickly. So now when I've got an engineer or a manager that's sitting there trying to analyze data, they don't have to try to go to 14 different databases. They've got one, and maybe even on just one single plot. So now that I can start looking at that graph, looking at that trend. And it's amazing that once you visualize the data, like I think you said something earlier that's perfect, when you've got everybody so busy and they're spread so thin, they know the answers, but they just don't necessarily have the right question being posed to them.
Yeah.
Versus now, if I can give you visual data, as soon as I show somebody that knows their process and I show them a chart that makes sense, they're going to go, oh my God, I know the answer. It takes like a second, but you had to get that put together. And so to me, that's where I think we specialize, is that whether it's old technology, new technology, whether you're out in the middle of no man's land, either way, we can get that information to the cloud, use your expectations, set your expectations to that data, and then keep you engaged with your assets.
Awesome. Really cool. Yeah. What else do we have?
Well, I mean, obviously the important thing is the payback, right? Everybody talks ROI, Mr. Accountant.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? The thing that's important for us is, like I said, we're keeping our stuff basically at an expense level. So if 3 executives go to lunch, basically that's about as much as our nodes typically cost. So there's a little bit of expense associated with it to get initially installed, and then there's a small monthly reoccurring charge. But we're talking, very, very small dollars, and it just, to be able to come in, connect, and be gone within 15, 20 minutes and give a company information, is I think was what makes this such a powerful tool. And it makes smart realistic for everybody.
Yeah. So implementation, you just said 10 to 15 minutes. Like, is that realistic that you could come in and set the system up in, over a weekend or something?
So typically what we do is we'll do a demo. So typically what we'll do is we'll come into a customer and they'll say, hey, they want us to prove that we can actually do this. So we'll come in, we have sensors that we put on these little magnetic mounts. So I can basically come in, stick it wherever I need to, point the sensor where it needs to go, and then I pretty much walk away after I power up the node because now it's collecting data. So once we're able to prove that, then what we'll do is we go back in and say, okay, now where do I need to permanently mount it?
Yeah.
So we'll come in, we've now identified the right sensor for the process, we'll design the bracketry, and we'll get that mounted. So that typically is not a quick process. That can be, depending on the complex bracketry, we've got a very expensive vision system running here in Orange County, and the bracketry was like $65,000 just by itself because it was such a very complicated, heavy-duty operation. And I won't kid you, it was a little overwhelming at times, but we got it going. So, but once that's done, for us to come in with our sensors and our nodes, it was my last installation. Literally, I was on and off their production floor in 15 minutes. So it really kind of depends on the complexity.
Got it. Okay. Well, Tony, I appreciate your time today. Thank you for coming on. How do people find you?
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. You can find us at www.coreinsightsystems.com, or at any time, just give me a phone call. My phone number is on the website, and I'm available, kind of sad to say, but 24 hours a day, pretty much all the time. So would love to talk to everybody.
Cool. Thanks, Tony. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.